Good morning, everyone, and good evening in Europe and Asia. Well, stress and nutrition is a very interesting topic. Can we load up on a particular type of food that can help us calm ourselves? We will explore stress reducing nutrients today in our session. I am Amita from Nourish Talk, a platform for natural, holistic, and integrative therapies. Presenting this fascinating topic, we have Emily Hyland live from UK today. Emily is a naturopathic nutritionist, qualified meditation teacher, and a brain health practitioner. Welcome, Emily.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Great, let's get started. So let's start with stress, which I think all of us are facing nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Absolutely. So stress, really, it's basically any kind of demand or challenge that requires the body to expend extra energy. And that's sort of from the body's point of view. And some stress is actually really helpful. So acute stress, that can help improve our physical and our mental performance. But what we're going to be focusing on today is the chronic stress. That's when it can become pretty damaging to our health. So it's really about finding that balance between the two. So there's a stress that can be motivating, but then there's also the one that can be reoccurring, and that's when it gets pretty dangerous. And so it's about finding that balance, and for each person, that can be very different. So what is stress? Stress, what does it do to the body?
Yeah, stress. How does it gets us all wound up when you say, "Oh, I'm stressed out"? What does it do to the body?
So it just kind of manifests in how we feel, and I'm sure how you respond to stress is different to how I would respond to stress. For some people, it can be like a full-on panic attack. For others, it might be digestive issues, tension, headache, etc. But it's really important to kind of tune in to how your body is responding to stress, because only then can you really do something about it when you realize what's going on. I think that's really important, figuring out what it is for you that sort of sets you off, I suppose.
Okay, so should we move on to the next slide?
Absolutely. The stress response. So this is obviously really important when we're in a dangerous situation and helps to protect our lives. So really what happens with stress is it starts in the brain. So information comes in through our eyes and our ears, and it travels to different parts of the brain. And what's really interesting is that the body interprets stress the same. So you might be late for a meeting, you might be in the middle of a war zone, but our body is always going to react in a similar way. It basically activates hormones and then sets off a branch of the nervous system, which we can see here. And we've got two different aspects of the autonomic nervous system. And they're kind of meant to work in tandem, sort of like a tag team. And we always want them to sort of work in a balanced way. And so we're, as humans, designed to respond to stress or something shocking. And what happens is that will activate our sympathetic nervous system. So our blood will pump faster, our heart will beat, our breathing will increase. And then after all of that, we're meant to relax and rest. And so that's when our parasympathetic nervous system sort of slows everything down and gets us back to feeling normal again. But the problem is we live in a world where our sympathetic stress response seems to be switched on, sort of stuck in that on position. And that's when the problems can occur, really.
Okay. So what do we do? Fight or flight response?
Yes. So what would you do if a tiger entered your room right now? And I'm guessing a lot of you are probably thinking, well, I'd run, I'd scream. And that's our fight or flight response. It's kicking in, it's getting us ready to fight the tiger, which I don't know if you would do. I personally wouldn't. Or flee, sort of getting away from that potentially dangerous situation. And it's just a primitive instinct that's within us. And we definitely need it to survive. For example, if a tiger came in the room. But nowadays we face less stressful situations, but we still respond the same. So what I find really interesting is looking at how the body reacts during the fight or flight response. So our breathing will change, our blood that's in the intestines, that goes to areas that anticipates needs. That will go to our hands and our feet to get us ready to run away. We'll have an increase in our cholesterol levels, which can help to thicken the blood in case we should suffer an injury and have to clot as well. So all of that's going on in the body. And that's really interesting, I think, to think about, because we think, oh, we're just feeling a bit panicky in a stressful situation, but there is lots going on inside. So what is your tiger? This is a good question, really, because like I said earlier, we're all very, very different. And I think it's really important to understand and recognize what is creating that stress in you, because how you perceive and deal with stress is not going to be the same as anyone else. But it's really important just to think about what situations or maybe conversations that can send you into that fight or flight mode. And wherever you can, I know it's not always possible, but looking at proactive preparation. So looking at the situation in perspective, looking at alternatives, and sort of pressing that reset button, I think is really important.
All right, so that let's talk a little bit about how the external and the internal factors, as far as the stress response is concerned.
So I think a lot of the time we concentrate on the external factors. So we think about our jobs, relationships, finance, etc. But I think a lot of the time we forget that internally we create a lot of stress, and that can be with poor diet, imbalanced gut flora, poor sleep, and our beliefs and perceptions and how we think about things as well. So I'm going to touch on that a little bit more today, I think, because I think that's going to be really important. So stress that won't stop. So here is what happens when that button that I was talking about earlier is stuck in that on position. And it happens over time. So the stress hormones are released. And if the stress is removed and you're able to deal with it, that's okay. But most of the time, the immune system gets affected. The body's attempting to restore balance time and time again. And over time, that's when it becomes problematic.
Okay, so cortisols. So we've all heard about cortisol levels. So let's talk about the cortisol levels with relation to stress.
So cortisol is our stress hormone, one of our major stress hormones. And it's probably the most important hormone in the body, I'd say, because if you don't have enough of it, you wouldn't be here, you wouldn't be alive. But if you have too much of it, that's when it can get potentially dangerous too. And if cortisol is lacking, you can't handle really any form of stress. So too much can lead to anxiety, digestive issues, concentration problems, muscle weakness, fatigue, etc. And also too little can present with very similar symptoms. So I think what I would say, if you are really concerned about cortisol levels, then it's worth potentially getting tested. But most of the time, it's generally high cortisol levels that we have to worry about, because a lot of us are stuck in that fight or flight constantly, and we don't give ourselves enough time to relax and get into that rest and digest. Those zebras.
This is really cute. Why do I never knew this, why zebras don't get ulcers.
Yeah. So I mean, I just really like this, because I just think it kind of makes sense when it's explained. It's a really simple sort of analogy, because I mean, it's not just zebras. I suppose it's any sort of wild animals, but zebras focus on what's in front of them. So if a lion is chasing them, they're going to obviously feel a little scared and they're going to run away. But when that lion isn't there, they're not going to continually worry. They're not going to think, am I going to be smart enough, worthy enough, strong enough to face that lion? Whereas humans, we do that a lot. So we're experiencing chronic stress all the time. But zebras, they don't. So it's just acute stress. Get ulcers, whereas humans, we definitely do.
That's really actually a very good analogy. So how do we reduce stress?
That is a very big and very good question. Similarly to kind of what I said earlier about how we respond to stress, it's very different. It's going to be different on how we manage stress as well. So I suppose the big question is now, I suppose if everyone who's watching, just kind of take maybe a minute or so just to think about what it is that you do to manage your stress, or maybe even what is it that you don't do but would like to do to help manage your stress? Because there's loads of techniques and various different things out there. For example, here are some. So we've got nutrition, yoga, gratitude, reading, so many different things that we can incorporate into our day-to-day lives. And it's not about doing all of them and feeling overwhelmed, resulting in more stress. It's not what we want. It's about finding the ones that work for you and the ones that you can sort of resonate with and think, actually, yeah, I do want to dedicate some more time to that. It's about making yourself a priority as well, I think is really important. And hopefully that's something that I would like people to take away from today, is spend a bit more time sort of focusing on them as well. And obviously nutrition is the one that we're going to talk about mostly.
Sure.
So.
But these are a lot of different ways one can help manage their stress.
Yeah.
So let's talk about nutrition, and how does nutrition affect the stress level?
Yes, absolutely. So stress and diet have always been linked, and I think even if you're feeling overly stressed, you can feel it in your body. And certainly digestive system is, for a lot of people, kind of the go-to when someone's feeling stressed. When you're under a lot of strain, you know how you feel when you eat better, when you're exercising more, you feel physically and emotionally better. So today I'm going to touch on some stress relieving foods, things to try and avoid as much as possible, and I'm going to touch on mindful eating. So for those of you that haven't heard of mindful eating, it's essentially being present with your food, and practicing mindfulness when you're eating, really. It's slowing down big time. It's more about spending time with your food, and it's definitely an act of self-care, I'd say, because a lot of the time we either sit at our desks when we're at work and we're working whilst eating. We eat on the go. We live in a world where fast food is everywhere, and we can just pick something up and just wolf it down. We don't even think about it most of the time, but it's really important for our digestion to slow down and take time and really chew our food, actually think about how we're feeling. So this process actually can really help sort of help you notice your body's biological cues, really, and get you back into how you should feel around food, and to enjoy it as well, to take time to savor every mouthful, as opposed to just, one bite and one chew and it's gone. So I think this is a really important practice to try if you haven't tried it before. So start off really simply, I'd say, is just sit and avoid being on your phone, avoid watching television, remove any distractions, and just take some deep breaths before you eat and chew your food. Now, when it comes to chewing your food, I have heard various different amounts of chews for optimal health, but really, I suppose it's as many as you can. I know if you think about it, probably 4 or 5 is kind of the average, whereas we should be looking more towards 20 plus. So I think that's a really big, important factor in stress relief, is mindful eating, definitely.
That's actually a very interesting concept that you've written here. Don't eat and watch TV. I think most of us do that in today's age.
Yeah. Or we don't sit at a dinner table anymore. That whole sort of family, community aspect and social aspect of food is gone. It's on our lap, and we're sort of, watching TV or on our phone, scrolling through, reading things. And a lot of the time we're reading like the news or something. And so that's quite stressful. And so our body's in fight or flight. And what happens when our bodies are in fight or flight? It basically essentially sort of shuts our digestive system down. So we aren't able to absorb the nutrients from our food that we should. So we need to be in rest and digest, parasympathetic nervous system state, because otherwise we aren't getting what we should from our foods.
Okay, so moving on, what to avoid when we are stressed out?
Well, yes, absolutely. First of all, definitely don't eat your laptop. That's what I would definitely say, my first recommendation there. But the 3 things that I would recommend trying to sort of avoid is caffeine, foods high in fat and sugar, and alcohol. So caffeine, I know, is something that everyone loves. And I'm not saying cut it out entirely if it's something that you really do enjoy. It's about reducing it when you feel like you're going through a period of a sort of extreme stress, because caffeine can actually help, like, basically reduce our ability to deal with stress. It acts as a stimulant. It causes our adrenal glands to release more cortisol. And obviously, if we're already stressed, our cortisol levels are going to be going really high, and it can contribute to insomnia, nervousness, anxiety, etc. Also, caffeine can deplete levels of magnesium and B vitamins, which we need, especially when we're going through a stressful period. So if you know you have a stressful time coming up, or if you're going through a particularly stressful time right now, which most of the world is, then maybe just swapping the caffeine for some herbal teas and seeing how you feel. There's lots of really good coffee alternatives as well. There's chicory coffee, there's dandelion coffee, and they are all caffeine free. So it might be worth exploring some of them. And then foods high in fat and sugar. I know when people are stressed, that's kind of a go-to. They want comfort food. They want something to make them feel better, to kind of satisfy that need. And it really does go back to the caveman days when we would come upon sort of all fat and sugar were hard to come by. So whenever we saw them or they were within the vicinity, we would stock up on them and they would help keep us going. But we don't really have the same thing nowadays. Fat and sugar is not hard to come by. We can get it anywhere, everywhere. But we still have that urge for biscuits, cakes, and crisps. And so what I would say is try just for a little bit in removing them from your environment. So some of you might still be working from home at the moment, spending a lot of time at home. So by just swapping in for some slightly healthier snacks and try making some of your own, that could be really helpful as well. And then finally, alcohol. So again, alcohol is something that people do tend to turn to during times of stress, but it's not ideal because it can result in sleep problems, it can result in insomnia again, and the body will release a large amount of adrenaline, and that can affect our blood sugar levels. And I'll touch on that in a bit, why having our blood sugar levels going up and down is not great for the body, especially when we are stressed.
Okay, so but these are the three things that typically people go to when they are stressed out,
Yeah.
or let me have a glass of wine, or let me just have some alcohol.
Yeah. I think, it is about balance for sure. Because if someone wants a glass of wine, then that's not going to be the worst thing in the world. But I think it's with anything, it's about balance, really. If you have something excessively, it's never going to be great for you. So if you want a glass of wine, I'm never going to stop anyone having a glass of wine. But I think, if they're relying on it and it's become sort of the go-to when they're feeling emotional or stressed, that's when I think it starts becoming a bit of a problem. But
Sure. All right. So what should we include when we are stressed out?
so there are some really key nutrients, which are here, that we're going to chat about a bit more, because when we are stressed, certain nutrients can become depleted. So when that emergency response sort of kicks in, we need more vitamin C, we need more magnesium, B5, zinc, etc. So magnesium, first of all, I'm going to touch on. I know it's number 3, but I want to talk about magnesium first. So definitely a good idea to increase your magnesium levels, and so you can do this quite easily through food. So things like green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds. Also, I think there's a little bit in chocolate, but obviously chocolate's got a bit of caffeine in it, but weigh it up, I suppose. If you want a bit of chocolate, it's not really going to do you too much harm. Also, you can soak in an Epsom salt bath. That's another way of getting magnesium in. Vitamin C. So vitamin C is found in really high amounts in the adrenal glands, and we can't actually produce vitamin C, so we really need to make sure we're getting it from our diet. And I know everyone thinks vitamin C in oranges for some reason, but vitamin C is also found in kiwis, red peppers, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, so a whole array of different fruits and veg. B5, so this is a really important cofactor that's needed during the stress response. And so when our stress levels increase, our body's requirements for B5 increases. And B5 is found in, I think it's shiitake mushrooms. I think it's a unusual mushroom. I think it's shiitake. It's found in avocados, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, but not many people seem to eat those at the moment. B6 as well, really important for many biochemical pathways in the stress response. And so you can find B6 in fish, whole grains, brown rice, etc. Zinc. This is actually sort of typically low. Actually, I think a lot of us are deficient in zinc. And I don't know if it's available worldwide, but there is a zinc taste test that you can do. You sort of just take a little capful of zinc, you swirl it around your mouth and then swallow it. And depending on what you can taste, it gives you an indication of how your zinc levels are. I can't remember if you taste a really strong metallic taste, then it's okay. But I can't remember which way round it is, but it's quite handy because a lot of us are deficient in zinc, and it's so important for our immune system, which is really important at the moment, of course. And also when we're stressed, it is used up so rapidly during periods of stress. So it's really, really important to make sure we're getting enough zinc. So zinc-rich foods, that includes shellfish, pumpkin seeds, legumes. So there are plenty of sources of it. So if you're really eating kind of an overall balanced, healthy diet, then you should be getting most of these nutrients in. But sometimes, like we were saying earlier, when we're feeling stressed, we don't tend to go for the healthy options always. Omega-3 as well. So stress can really sort of tax the heart. So omega-3 is really, really important for our heart. So making sure we're getting oily fish, walnuts, etc. as well. And then finally, probiotic-rich foods. And really, it should say gut-healthy foods here, I think, because it's important to be aware that not everyone can tolerate probiotic-rich foods. If you're struggling with IBS or you have a digestive issue generally, then probiotics might not really work for you. So find foods that do. If you can tolerate probiotic-rich foods, then make sure you're getting prebiotic-rich foods in there too. They kind of work like a tag team in the gut, making sure we're getting lots of good bacteria in there. So you can have things like kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir. There's some good options there.
That's great. That's
Sorry, that was a lot of information.
A lot of information for releasing our stress.
Yeah, I know.
I'm already de-stressed by listening to you.
Stress busting foods, I suppose, like to summarize all of that, a lot of words there that was. So to simplify it, I'm going to share my four of my four favorite stress busting foods. And the avocado is giant, and I'm not sure why it's giant, but that doesn't mean I love avocado. Is not my favorite one out of these ones. I have no favorites. They're all equal to me. So water first up. So this is actually quite interesting, and I think some of you might find this quite fascinating. So a really simple way is if you're feeling really overwhelmed and really stressed, is just to have a glass of water, because even very, very mild dehydration, that can increase your cortisol levels, which obviously, as we know, contributes to increased stress. So I'm not saying drinking water is going to make all of those stresses and what's going on in your life vanish, but it can help your body sort of handle stress a bit better. Sometimes something as simple as a glass of water can make a really big difference. So I think that's a really good tip to know, because I think when we think of stress, we think we've got to go for all these really fancy foods, but sometimes a glass of water is all that we need. So I'm going to touch on the avocados now because it's right there and it's huge. So avocados are full of vitamin C, they've got B6 in there, they've got potassium, they've got fiber, and they've also got lots of healthy fats and monounsaturated fats. So they're a really good sort of stress fighting snack, I'd say. And then on the bottom left, we have yogurt. So yogurt contains that good bacteria that I touched on before. And there is emerging evidence that shows that so lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, they can be really beneficial for our brain health. What else we got there? Is that green leafy vegetables? Yes, on the right hand side. I was trying to work out what that one was. So things like spinach and kale, they are sort of stress busting powerhouses. They are a rich source of magnesium, which we talked about earlier. And so that helps with regulation of cortisol, keeping our blood pressure levels in check. Green leafy veg also contains folate, which actually sort of plays a role in the production of a feel-good chemical in our brain, dopamine. So not only will it help to reduce stress, it'll also help with dopamine production. So that's kind of a win-win there.
That's amazing. All right, what should we
Eat a
do?
rainbow. Eat a rainbow, I would always say. So it's sort of going back to that, eating a healthy, balanced diet. But eating lots of colourful fruits and vegetables is really important, because I think we kind of get stuck in a rut. So if we go shopping or if we order food, we kind of go for the same things because it's familiar to us and we're used to it. And it's quite nice to have that sort of comfort. But it's actually really good for your gut health to try lots of different fruits and vegetables. It really helps to increase the diversity in the gut, and that is really important for a healthy microbiome. So lots of different colors. So I think a really good way of doing this is just introducing a new vegetable or fruit, maybe even like once a month or once every couple of weeks, and see how you feel. It's quite nice as well to kind of experiment in the kitchen as well. So it can be a fun thing to do too. Start the day with a balanced breakfast. So I think it's really important to say here that I know not everybody likes breakfast. Some people don't need to have breakfast, and that's fine. But I would say if you do have breakfast, try and make it as packed full of goodness as you can, because I think it's just a really good chance to get as many fruits and veggies in as possible, making sure you're getting a good source of protein, good source of fats, good source of carbohydrates, as much as you can, because then you know that you're set up for the day. You've had loads of the good stuff already, and then you're kind of ready, and you kind of feel like you can handle anything when you've had a really good breakfast, I find.
And the herbal tea too, right? That's what you mentioned earlier. Start maybe complement that with an herbal tea. That would be a good.
Yes, absolutely, that's a really good idea. Yeah, that's a very good idea. Interestingly, yeah, you mentioned herbal tea, because I know lots of people want to start their day with sort of green tea, because green tea is kind of like it's very popular at the moment. But although green tea contains caffeine, what it does contain is something called L-theanine, and L-theanine actually helps to calm us down. So I think green tea can actually be a really good option. Although it's got caffeine in it, it has that L-theanine to kind of help balance you out. So yeah, green tea and a healthy breakfast is a good way to start the day for sure. So protein, this is really, really important, because when we're chronically stressed, the body has an increased demand for protein. And what protein does is it helps to slow the release of sugars into the bloodstream. And so making sure you're getting good, lean protein sources. So that's fish, eggs, beans, lentils, meat, nuts, whatever it might be for you. It's really important to keep your blood sugar levels balanced. So if our blood sugar levels aren't balanced, the body perceives that as a stressor. So imbalanced blood sugar levels can actually add to our stress as well. So the best way to do this is make sure you're having protein with every snack and every meal. This is something I say a lot. It's sort of my go-to phrase, but I can't stress the importance of it, because it really imbalanced blood sugar levels due to lack of protein is really detrimental to our health. So that's another takeaway that I hope people take with them from today. Avoid highly refined foods. Yes. So these are, well, as you can see in the picture, sort of foods like cereals, very sugary cereals, biscuits, sweets, chocolates, white pasta, white bread, etc. They can spike our blood sugar levels. And like I said, if our blood sugar levels are going up and down all over the place, then that's when problems start to occur. So what you can do is you can replace those foods with unrefined options, so whole grain options. And for example, if cereal is kind of your go-to, some cereals are okay, but there's so many that are packed with sugar. So starting your day with things like eggs, what else could you have? Rye bread and avocado, with some lemon juice, some salmon, whatever it might be for you. Find something that you enjoy as well. That's really important. But just try making a couple of swaps here and there and see how it makes you feel. Because I know if I've had something like a biscuit or a slice of cake, I know that I will instantly feel that sugar rush and I will feel great. And then I start feeling really lethargic, really sluggish, and it just doesn't make me feel good. So kind of tune into how you feel and see how you go.
What about dates? Can you?
Dates.
Yes.
I use dates quite a lot, but I always make sure I have protein with them. So I'll have dates with nut butter or dates with tahini. But normally dates and nut butter. I don't really have a huge problem with dates. Obviously, lots of recipes, they call for like 25 dates, which is very excessive. But yeah, I think a couple of dates, because again, I don't have too much problem with natural sugars. Our body kind of understands them. It's sort of the processed refined sugar that our body can't really handle and sort of gets a bit thrown by. So yeah, I think dates are a good option. Just make sure you're kind of monitoring them, I suppose, because they can often make it like just be a replacement. So people will sort of say, like I was reading a recipe earlier, and it was like 200 something grams of dates for something like a really small dish, and I was like, I don't need that many dates in there. It's gonna be so sugary. So yeah, I think dates are a good option, but within like keep it balanced for sure.
Sure. All right. Okay.
So here's
So
my really long list of things that we've on today. Healthy breakfast, but again, if breakfast isn't your thing, just make the first meal you have of the day as packed full of good stuff as you can, because I think it's really important, because we never know what's going to happen with our days. We never know where things are going to go. So if any opportunity you can, if you have access to some good food, then take that opportunity and get it when you can. Prioritize protein, of course, because it helps to slow the release of sugars into the bloodstream. Swapping refined carbohydrates for unrefined. Eating a wonderful, colourful rainbow every day. And I don't mean eat lots of Skittles, I mean lots of colourful fruits and veg. Balancing blood sugar levels, mindful eating, and focus on those stress reducing nutrients.
that's actually a great advice. So we are open for questions. If someone has any questions, I see the participants in the Zoom session. I'll just ask one question to choose for the viewers to think what kind of questions they want to ask. So what would be what would be a typical day? What should we eat? Like you said, you start with an herbal tea,
Yeah.
And then some maybe avocado toast or some fruits, and then lunch and dinner and snack. What kind of, you said rainbow a lot, eat a rainbow. So what would be your recommended, sort of like on a very high level, a meal that one should have if someone is stressed out? So we are talking about stress here,
Yeah, of course.
Not a weight or anything else.
I mean, it's interesting because obviously they all kind of like tie in together, and healthy eating and balanced eating is it's good for everything. We'll sort of see benefits in our life overall. So like a stress busting day of food is going to be quite similar to sort of general overall health. So for example, if we're having avocado and toast for breakfast, that's a good start. I like that. And some people feel the need to snack, and that's fine. Some people don't. And so if you are snacking, I'd say that's another opportunity to kind of sneak some stuff in there for sure. So let's think, what could we put in? So things like, I don't know if you've tried protein balls, they're very popular. People like
protein bars.
So
yeah.
And so sometimes I'll make carrot cake version ones. So I'll just grate up some carrots. I'll sometimes put some dates, some ground almonds, nut butter. What else could you put in there? You could put things like cinnamon in. That can really help with blood sugar as well. It's another way, because like spices and herbs, they have so many healing properties as well. So they're another great thing to kind of add in as and when. So like that could be a great snack. And then for lunch, something like maybe, I mean, I always think you should have probably a bigger lunch than you do dinner, because our digestion towards the evening, it can, we eat a little bit later than we would like to, and we're going to sleep, and we need to kind of, slow down really. So for lunch, you can have something like oily fish with brown rice, and then you can have some of the kale or spinach, some sort of green leafy vegetable in there. And then dinner, that's a really good one. I'd probably say something like a soup, maybe with some lentils, because
you said proteins. You said protein, load up on the protein as well.
Yeah. So that's I think that would be a nice stress busting day.
That's great. That's great. Any questions anyone has, please feel free to put it in chat and ask the questions if there is any particular question. These are educational sessions, and we try to bring new sessions every week on a different topic. I know all of us are stressed out right now. So yeah, I think the kale and spinach, loading up on that with a simple salad of some seeds.
Yeah,
You said the seeds
for
also,
sure.
right?
Yeah, that's a great option too. Like that would be like a really nice sort of light lunch or light dinner. That's a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. And then if you need a shot of energy, then you take up on the protein bar, as you said, on the nut butter and some of the other ingredients.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think when you start seeing the difference in your blood sugar levels, you realize you don't crave the sugary foods so much anymore. Because I mean, it does take a bit of time. I wouldn't say it's just straight away because, you know, changing habits isn't something that we can sort of change overnight. So it does take a bit of time. But yeah, you can definitely notice a difference when you just really simple switches. It doesn't take too much, but it can make a big difference.
And then you recommend, along with the proper food, proper nutrition, you know, do some yoga or some other breathing or any other exercises to calm yourself down, like meditation. You mentioned that earlier as well, right? So you would combine the nutrition with the right exercise to bring the stress down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think exercise itself can actually be a stressor on the body. So that's important to be mindful of that, because if we're working out a lot, that can actually do more harm to the body than good. So, for example, if we have hormone issues, say, and like say, for example, someone with someone who hasn't had their period in a very long time, and so this actually is happened to a client of mine last week. So she came to me, she hadn't had her period for 2 years, and she came to me and we worked together, and this was our final session together, and she had her first period in 2 years, and she was exercising every single day. She was working out for 2 hours a day, and that was a huge stress on her body, and all she had to do was make a few tweaks to her diet, and she cut down on the exercise, and she changed it for yoga, and she was doing walking, and what else was she? I think she was doing a bit of Pilates as well, but it was really low intensity exercise and changed everything. So I think it's important to remember that although exercise is great for us, if we're feeling really stressed, it can actually make things worse sometimes. So that's quite important as well to just think about.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. I think any other questions? I'm trying to think that we should let our viewers know. Anything else for final thoughts from you?
Oh, good question. I suppose, I know it's very like sort of becoming better at stress is much easier said than done. And I think it's about taking steps in the right direction. It's not about completely overhauling your whole life, because that in itself can be quite stressful, but just through, as I was saying earlier, proactive preparation and just taking those baby steps to figuring out what it is that gets you stressed in the first place, because then you're going to be more able to deal with it once it comes along, because you know and you think, I don't want to be in this situation. That's something that triggers me. And so then you can help improve how you deal with it. And with things like nutrition and gentle exercise, meditation, whatever it might be for you, try whatever you can and see what's the right fit. But it's always going to be personal. So make sure it is tailored to you and your needs. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, and remember, zebras don't get ulcer, right? That's
yeah. So make sure your stress is acute. It's not chronic. We don't want it going on forever. That's what I'd say.
And remember, and figure out what kind of a tiger you are. That's the other takeaway. That's a very important takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. What is it? What's your trigger? What's your tiger? Whatever it might be. Yeah, absolutely.
That's wonderful. That's really good. Great. Thank you so much, Emily, for joining us from London. And we want to thank our viewers for watching us. Please help us spread the word, share our videos, and let us know your feedback on our sessions. And we will be bringing more sessions in September. Those would be more like workshops. So we would let everyone know. With that, thank you so much for joining. Signing off now.